All right, we're going to show another video and then go to a couple more speakers.
Joining me for discussion are what has been the lead in many of these ballot question fights over the last couple of decades, Barbara Anderson. The Tea Party and Republican consult has been critical of the Attorney General's decision to bar that death penalty question from 1996.
Can people hear this?
I've been at it roughly almost 2 decades. What's the, I don't say obsession, but when you say what's the obsession with ballot politics?
Well, you're right. First of all, it's a great important favors of in training. The thing that's best about it is a sense of control. That in this state and 25 other states, we the voters, we the citizens, are not, we the taxpayers, are not completely helpless before our government. If they do something we don't like, we can use our referendum process and try to repeal that law. If they don't do something that needs to be done, and we want them, we want those signatures, put along on the ballot, and let our own voters make a decision. But it's pure democracy, and it's absolutely wonderful.
But people's passion for pure democracy already has changed over the years. Yet 1 year ago, there were a record time number of questions on the ballot. Why this sort of all-time passion? Why these super numbers?
Well, I think people realize as it goes on that this is a way to do it, and they learn how to do it. Also, I think the legislature is becoming more and more incompetent as the years go by.
Jake, not at all different, but somebody who has spoken out on a number of these issues. We'll get to the death penalty later. Share Barbara's view about why this is an obsession, really not just here, but as Barbara said, in dozens of states across the country.
Oh, I think the people in the United States, especially in Massachusetts, are just frustrated by the fact that the legislature here in Massachusetts and other places just do not do the job they're expected to do. They're sent up to be given, and as we know by one of the ballot questions, it talks about cutting their pay. They are getting more money for doing less work, and it's an awful lot of inside baseball. And whether it be liberal issues or conservative issues, or right down the middle, it's all inside baseball, and the people's work is not being done.
I'm going to try I'm going to teach you about the Barbara Anderson and Tea Party and Republican consult. When I came to Massachusetts, as you all know, about a decade ago, my organization actually, its first bumper sticker, I was showing to you, said good tax policy doesn't feel like bumper stickers. It was essentially targeted at her. Barbara Anderson shouldn't do these kinds of things in the ballot. But I agree with you, as my sort of growing support for balanced democracy, for lack of a better expression, is in direct proportion to my growing distaste about what happens or doesn't happen on the Hill. And I think that's how most people watching the show things feel.
Well, I think there's a level of intelligence that really is lacking. I don't mean to paint everyone in the legislature with a broad brush, but they're paid to do a job, and they're paid to go up there and represent us because we are out doing what we're supposed to be doing, earning a living, taking care of our families, taking care of our yards, and they're up on Beacon Hill, and they're not doing the job. They're not debating things thoroughly. It's all inside baseball.
Well, it's interesting that we agree because two fairly conservative people and a fairly liberal kind of guy, one of the non-elected in Massachusetts, fairly. But it's interesting when you look at last year's questions, this year's questions, many coming from the so-called left, many coming from the more conservative fiscal side of things, but hardly too many. Bill Galvin, the new Secretary of State of Massachusetts, almost immediately after having been elected, said, listen, ballot questions are a constitutional right, but there's simply too many. I'm going to form a commission. I haven't heard anything about it in the last few months. We might even be on it. And let's decide how we can lessen the number. Should we lessen the number?
There were 9 ballot questions, for heaven's sakes. What is the problem here? All we had to do is go into the board and just spend a couple extra minutes and make a decision on 9 questions, which was admittedly difficult because they didn't bother to put anything on the ballot. Some of those questions were.
That was an aberration.
That was an aberration. But under normal circumstances, you have all the months of the ballot campaigns to find out about it. Then you have pros and cons that we newspapers, you have talk shows like this, you have constant debates and arguments going on in the community. The voter goes in to make a decision on a ballot question, and all she has to do is vote yes or no whether he or she likes it. The legislator goes in, they have to vote on how they feel, how the constituents feel, how the leadership wants them to vote, how they have to trade out that vote with somebody else's, and then of course when they vote what they're doing, they have to push a button. It's a complicated vote for them, it's a simple vote for us.
But you're talking about the real people who are out there who actually cast votes on these things. Well, I came to agree with Barbara again, becoming a born-again ballot supporter where I was a decade ago. People in that part of the office who work till 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock at night, who have to worry about their kids, do they really walk into the voting booth on November 6th, 7th, or 8th, whatever that first Tuesday after the first Monday is, and really understand the essence of what they're voting on?
I think for the most part people do. There's certainly ballot questions become very complicated, very intricate, and certainly there are people out there who don't. But the shame on Bill Galvin, who is he to tell us that they're doing ballot questions? If there were 9 or 900 on there, that's not his right. His constitutional obligation is to make sure it's done properly, and it's up to us to decide whether or not we go through a process of petition and we go through a process of
Now, there's much more money involved in this stuff, both in terms of buying signatures to get questions on the ballot, and there's much more money involved in campaigns, which I at least think help determine the outcome of a lot of those things. Isn't that changed? Have you seen that change?
Oh yeah, definitely. Not in this part. We don't buy signatures. Because we're all volunteers, so I don't even see that much at the beginning of the process. But by the time you get on the ballot, when it's perceived that you have to buy television, then there's a lot of money spent. And at that point, I found out this last campaign, you and I were battling each other on the graduate income tax. Then the professionals start moving in and start trying to run the campaign. These professionals are from New York and California. They don't know about your state, they don't care about your state, but they come in and big money buys it. But I don't think that, I still don't think that influences the voter himself. The voter can take that into account when they're making their decision.
I'm voting, by the way, and I happen to think there's some questions that are far bigger than money. I think you win any question between the right side of the cigarette issue, which means anti-cigarette from my perspective. You can probably win any question, virtually any question.
Yes, it's back on
Tax legislators or some. But let's talk about others. Let's look at 1994 term limits question, a highway construction question, a highway funding question, a written anti-rent control question, all decided by less than 5 points, and all of the proponent outspending the other side by 10, 20, 30, 50 more. Look at this term limits question. 4 points. Opponents outspent the opponents. 470,000 and 5,000. Every single winner spent more than every single
But
winner.
your side, the Massachusetts Association of Public Employee Unions, always outspend us until this past campaign of grant tax, always outspend us on Prop 2.5, on the surtax repeal, on the state issue of that. And we're still.
But I'd love to have more money.
So what are we doing?
But don't you really believe, Gene, 9 times out of 10 money's going to win this question?
I disagree. I think that they may make a difference in a very, very close race in getting the message out. But keep in mind, too, today you have real capabilities, you have CNN, you have all the newspapers, all the television, you have lengthy newspaper summaries, you have summaries sent out by the Secretary of State's office, and you have people just talking in general and talking with people who are proactive in these particular situations. And I don't think so. I don't think money makes that much
I think you're generally right. I think the reality is that things like blue laws, you can buy a law. If you've got enough money, you've got enough money,
You cannot buy the voting in Massachusetts. What you do, if you spend against, you simply make an issue that this particular group is raising a lot of money from out of state, if they really do something, and you use it as part of the campaign. Well, you can't go by 1994. People went into that ballot box and were doing all the ballots, you didn't know what to vote on, there was nothing written on the ballot. They walked in carrying a red voter information booklet or index card. They listened to the issues, they played it against both sides, they made the decision, and again, my point is still the same. You buy fewer voters in the ballot campaign than you buy legislators.
Let's talk about 1996 briefly before we take a break, and then we're going to go through the whole list of questions. Let's start with 2 questions that aren't going to be there. One, at least tentatively, is a question of the death penalty. The Attorney General said it's an inappropriate question to be on the ballot. Actually, for those who are not ballot question aficionados, there's a provision in the Massachusetts Constitution, like any other 25 states that have such things, that say that there are certain kinds of issues that the voters may not decide. They're left exclusively to the province of the legislature. In the states, dealing with religion, courts, you can't make an appropriation on the ballot. You can't do it with the judiciary. The Attorney General, that's right, the Attorney General, Scott Harshbarger, decided, and we were critical of his decision, that this did deal with the power of the courts, and as a result, the death penalty question was inappropriately, would be inappropriately before the voters. You weren't happy about it. Why?
Well, I think, one, the people are saying they don't have enough to speak out on. That's the first thing, and that's most important. Two, many have already come out and said that Scott Harshbarger is wrong in saying that the courts or the law prevents him from putting it on the ballot. And his comment in the paper the other day saying that sometimes the right thing to do legally is not always the most popular thing to do politically. We're talking about someone who is probably the most political animal that I see any in the sense of characterization on Beacon Hill, and he has always politicized matters to his benefit. And I
don't know if this is anti-death penalty. You're former client, Janice Berger.
That's right, and I work with James Berger. But whether you like or dislike the death penalty, agree or disagree with it, putting it on the ballot so that people have a right to speak their mind is what it should be.
You know, I have to say, I'm a bit surprised hearing from you, who I think is a legitimate and honorable conservative, and I don't ordinarily put those adjectives before conservative, to say that first and foremost, the voters support. Bill Weld said something like, people in the state are in favor of restoration of capital punishment, so Scott Harshbarger is not in touch with majority opinion. Why does the issue of whether voters support or oppose something override what the Constitution says on a particular issue?
Well, that is his interpretation of what the Constitution says. Others have said that he's wrong on that issue, and this is
Okay, I want to, some people that were very instrumental in the formation of CLT and helping CLT over the years couldn't make it today. So I just very quickly will read some of the things they sent in and say, if you could please read this at the celebration. One of them was Ed King, not the former governor, but Edward J. King, the West Roxbury businessman who founded CLT in the 70s. And he wrote a short note, and he said, "Let us honor her memory by vowing to always speak for economic freedom and less government. And as tax-paying citizens, let us be grateful for her life and for her work on our behalf." That was from Edward J. King, the founder of CLT. We also had a note from Don Cassidy, who was first chairman of our board of directors. And he said, "Barbara's leadership of CLT over the years meant several $1 billion more stayed in the pockets of the rightful owners, not being taxed and spent unnecessarily." And he said, "Celebrate a great life, exquisitely lived." That was Don Cassidy. And we have John Keller, who you all know Keller at Large. "I'm so sorry I can't be with you today," but he goes on to say, "Sometimes political activists get so caught up in their cause and the politics surrounding it, they lose sight of the human element. Not Barbara Anderson. She once confessed to me that her greatest weakness as an activist was a willingness to believe in the basic decency of some of the politicians she lobbied. From Richie Vogt to Tom Finner and beyond, there were a string of Pauls who at the one point persuaded Barbara that they were on some level on her side. And sooner or later, I'm always disappointed," she told me. And at times, Barbara was disappointed in the voters too, but only temporarily. She believed that when presented with the truth, most people would grasp it and respond to it in positive ways for the betterment of all. In her extraordinary success against wealthier, more powerful opponents over the years speaks to the truth of that belief. Nothing angered her more than when politicians express contempt for the will of the people. So Barbara, if you're eavesdropping, look around this room, observe the tributes since your passing from across the political spectrum, and rest assured, you were right all along to put your trust in the people. And we have also from Washington, D.C., I'll read this. "Barbara Anderson did more to strengthen the Bay State than any other modern governor, state legislator, or member of the Kennedy family. She led the fight for Prop 2.5 and did what so many well-intentioned revolutionaries forgot to do. She stayed to protect the ground she won, and holding that ground was a life's work. Thousands of men and women were able to keep their homes, stay and live and work in Massachusetts, and afford to send their kids to college because of the victories of Citizens for Limited Taxation. That is making a difference. We all wonder if we would have had the courage to stand as the Patriots did in Concord and Bunker Hill. We know that Barbara Anderson had that courage because we saw her live it and she shared it with us all." That was from Grover Norquist from Americans for Tax Reform. I just tell one quick story and then we'll get into a couple more speakers and maybe one more video and then we'll end the program. But I actually told this story on Howie's car show when he asked for a few anecdotes. And this is actually was told to me not by, I didn't actually see this, but it was told to me by Jerry Cohen, who was chairman of the Taxation Committee in 1980, state representative from Andover, or North Andover. And he said that during the fall of 1980, he said, "I debated on Prop 2.5. He says, "I was going all over the state telling people what an awful law this was and everything." And he said, "I got invited to speak in Millis at a forum, and I was going to speak to against the proponent of 2.5, a woman named Barbara Anderson, who I hadn't met, and but I heard, she wasn't a bad debater." So he said, "I spent a week before the debate going up to all sorts of statistical data and all the reasons and crunching the numbers why we can't have a 2.5. It would be awful for the state, it'd be terrible." And he says, "I thought, I'm prepared." So I get to Millis and I go, "There's about 300 or 400 people." And I introduced myself to Barbara Anderson, and I give my speech first. And he said it was about 15, 20 minutes long, and I'm going through all the data, and I thought I was doing pretty good, and finished my speech, and I got, you know, polite applause from the audience. And he says, and then Barbara got up, and she turned to me and she said, well, you know, I don't know much about all these statistics the chairman's spouting, but I know one thing, just as an ordinary housewife, property taxes are too damn high. And the place went crazy. He said that people standing up, applauding, cheering, and he said, I'm just sinking in my seat. A week's worth of work on down the drain. Forget it, why am I even here? But before I introduce next two speakers, I'd like to introduce someone who just popped in for a moment, who would just like to give a moment on Barbara Anderson. Governor Baker.
Thank you, Chip, and thank you all for being here. And I actually gave the commencement at UMass Medical School today and didn't know how long that was going to take. So it ended a little earlier than I thought, so I came by just to watch some of the video and hear some of the commentary and pay my respects. I go back pretty far with Barbara Anderson. I used to work for Howard Foley at the Mass High Tech Council. Howard Foley is another person who now lives in Colorado and worked on the original Prop 2.5 campaign in 1980 with the Mass High Tech Council, and as was said earlier, stayed to hold the ground associated with the success of Prop 2.5. And truthfully, the only point I want to make today, because it's an important one, there was a whole bunch of stuff up here about how Barbara oversimplified things and didn't know what she was talking about and all the rest. And I get the fact that that was all part of debates that happened a long time ago. But as somebody who served as Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary of Administration and Finance, selectman in my local community, and now has had the honor to serve as governor, let me tell you, and it's been part of this conversation for most of my adult life, Prop 2.5 was probably the single most important thing that happened to fiscal and economic policy in the Commonwealth of Mass in my lifetime. Period. Right. Anybody who suggests otherwise is just kidding themselves. Three key points here. The first is, before Prop 2.5, the number of communities in Massachusetts that were actually being valuated at their full market value, you could probably count on one hand, which meant you had literally no consistency across 351 cities and towns with respect to what property was actually worth, or any consistency from block to block to block within most cities and towns in Massachusetts. Second thing it did was it forced every community in Massachusetts to professionalize its valuation, organization, and operation. And the reason that mattered was because without a professional organization to determine what real property value was from one community to the next and one block to the next, you had no equity at all and no visibility into what the true value of anything was in any community. And the games that were being played with this were extraordinary. And that gave, for the first time, the Commonwealth of Mass a framework for determining how local aid should work. Because until then, you didn't have any valid mechanism for determining how state aid should support local communities one way or another. And when I think about the structure and the stability and the focus on transparency and competency that was brought on through the passage of Prop 2.5, it was by far one of the most important elements in the success we've had economically and the success we've had in almost every other way you can think of over the course of the past 35 years. So the next time somebody says to you the problem with Prop 2.5 or with Barbara Anderson or any of the people who are involved in that is they were too simple-minded in the way they thought about a really complicated issue, you should know that it cleaned up a horrible mess, created more transparency and legitimacy than we'd ever, and credibility than we'd ever had before in valuing property, determining local aid, and everything else, and created, for all intents and purposes, the platform that has led to the success we've seen economically in the Commonwealth of Mass over the past 35 years. That is the opinion of me. It's just one guy's opinion, but I've played a whole bunch of roles over the course of my professional career and believe that beyond any reasonable doubt, Prop 2.5 and Barbara Anderson's work and involvement in it has been an enormous positive to the Commonwealth of Mass. And the final thing I'll say, somebody else in one of those videos, and I can't believe how emotionally pissed off I am as I think about this. Somebody else in one of those videos said that, you know, Prop 2.5 as passed would have been a disaster. And it was rescued by the people on Beacon Hill and made adjustments to it after the fact. Every change that was made to Prop 2.5 after it was enacted was supported, discussed, negotiated, and supported by Barbara and the folks at CLT. Every single one. Yes, she stayed to protect the ground she gained, but she and Chip and the rest of the folks on the team, if somebody brought to them legitimate concern about the way the law was working and said we need to change this so that we can continue to benefit from the fundamental objectives of what Prop 2.5 was about, she was all ears. And yeah, there have probably been a dozen significant changes made to Prop 2.5 over the course of the past 35 years or so. But every single one of those was done with the input and the support of Barbara and the folks at CLT. And I couldn't agree more with what Jim Browdy said, which is that for those of us who believe in civic participation, and those of us who believe in debate, and those of us who believe you can disagree with somebody without hating them, there has never been anybody quite like Barbara Anderson, and I can't imagine that there ever will be again. And we are all much richer for having had an opportunity to be part of her world for the better part of the past 40 years. And I have to go to another event, I apologize, but and thank you, Chip, for giving me a
we're running a little late, so I'll just tell you what's coming up. We're going to have 2 more speakers, and then we're going to show the rest of the video that we started at the very beginning of the program, the last 15 minutes, and then Chip Ford's going to get up and finish the program with a little spiel and a thank you. So my next speaker up is someone who has been around for 30 years, and he's been a pain in the neck and a scourge to just about everybody. And that person is Howie Carter.
Thanks, Chip. Thanks for having me here. And of course, like everybody here, almost everybody here, I knew Barbara in the days of Prop 2.5, and I was at City Hall when it passed, and I knew it was going to pass when Mayor White started trying to close police and fire stations in East Boston. Even before it was passed, there was no money left. And he went over to East Boston and he thought he could do the dog and pony show and say, hey, you can't vote for this. I have to I shut down all the police and fire stations. He was chased through the tunnel back into the city. So basically, when you start shutting down somebody's police and fire stations, they suddenly start paying attention to what's going on. It was like the British being routed in Lexington and Concord in 1775. But so I get to know Barbara, with all the fights were going on that Charlie Baker was just talking about, trying to save Proposition 2.5. And then, of course, Mike Dukakis ran for president in 1988, the national model of Massachusetts, as you may recall. And things were falling apart in 1989, and he had come back to Massachusetts, had announced that he was a lame duck. Brilliant political strategy, right? You know, Sonny McDonnell used to say, "Lame duck is my favorite dish," but everybody was feasting on it at the State House. And so I was running amok. Jerry in the Herald, Jerry Williams was running amok on RKO. Barbara was, holding her ground on Beacon Hill. And one day I wrote a column about this state senator, Ed Burke, in Framingham, and he had gotten his wife a job running the MWRA, the Mass Water Resources Authority hiring department. And they were bringing on all these hacks from the campaign and from South Boston and from the South Shore. And so he had an opponent, and the opponent Xeroxed one of my columns. And if you remember Ed Burke, some of you probably do, he was almost as tall as Charlie Baker. And he was running against this little guy, maybe like Dukakis, Bulger-like, he was about a foot taller. And so this guy's passing out copies of my column, showing what a hack Ed Burke and his wife are. And Burke gets really angry at him and jumps him and gets him on the ground and starts throttling him and is choking him. The next day there's a column in the Middlesex News, the Metro West News, whatever they call it. And this guy says Ed Burke was a victim of the forces that are running amok. He almost killed this guy. They said he was a victim of Howie Carr. Said, but he could have just as easily been a victim of Jerry Williams or Barbara Anderson. For those are the three real governors of Massachusetts today. And they said we were the governors, but they made it sound more like we were the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Just creating havoc wherever we were. And we saw that, all of us saw the column. And Jerry called us up and said, I think the governors are going to have to meet in special sessions on the radio. And at the end of the 2 hours, I knew that my Tuesday afternoons were going to be occupied for the foreseeable future. And it was the best. I've done a lot of radio since then, but it was the most fun I've ever had on the radio. And I heard a couple of people say that they just were they cracked up when it was going on. And it was just it was a wonderful time. And being with Barbara every Tuesday afternoon. Jerry and I, if you don't recall, we had a tendency to sometimes go off a little bit. We would go crazy if we saw blood in the water. And it was great to have Barbara with us because she was always, she always had as Jim said, she didn't take it, Jim Rowdy said, she didn't take it as personally as Jerry and I did. And it was just so nice to have her there with us all the time. And it worked perfectly as I think a political and an entertainment medium. And it was always great to see her. And then we'd go out and we'd go to balls and make appearances. And she was just a great person to be with. And I'm so glad too, because at the time when the governors came into prominence, the politics on Beacon Hill was changing. And she used to have the office, you remember, up above Pompagino's there on Tremont Street. I guess she got it at a reduced rate from Mike Valerio, and it would always be nice to be there in the afternoon because all the nice smells would be wafting out the pizza and the calzones. And she could always walk up to Beacon Hill to the State House and lobby these guys, these state reps. But the thing was, as time went on, the cunning of Tom Finneran, Felon Finneran as I call him, he realized that all he had to do was make all these people chairman or vice chairman of committees. $7,500 a year he would give them for a raise, and he owned them. You couldn't argue with them anymore. They couldn't be persuaded to keep that. Alan Sisitsky, the senator, used to say you could buy these guys with a water cooler. And he was right about that, but when you give them a water cooler and $7,500, you own their souls. And so there wasn't much Citizens for Limited Taxation could do on Beacon Hill anymore, because they couldn't really debate the issues. And then it got worse as time went on, as they didn't even feel the need to observe the results of the referendum questions. You guys saw that. I mean, I noticed during the progressive income tax debate, Jay Kaufman from Lexington was saying, well, you know, we did abide by the results of the 2000 referendum question to roll back the state income taxes. That was in 2000, and he said by 2019 we'll have the tax rate back to 5%. And he wanted a pat on the back, an attaboy for doing that. So, you know, as Barbara said in that video from 2014, there's so many the interest of the voter is so distracted. Jerry Williams used to talk about the book he loved, Amusing Ourselves to Death. You know, we're all on the internet watching old movies and whatever else, and not paying attention, not reading the newspapers the way we should. And it's just it's a shame that people don't have the same powers of concentration that they used to. But anyway, it's been a great time, and I really treasured knowing Barbara all these years. And you know, like everybody else, I have a story about Question 3 in 1990. You know, Question 3, it goes too far, cutting the state budget. Guy told me this later, that he was a wise guy. I don't think any of you know him, George Cater. He was the guy who owned a loan company called Urana Loans, and so he was.
I know.
Destroy your faith in the integrity of the hip hop movement. George Cater was making a delivery to Whitey Bulger or getting some money from Whitey Bulger. He had to meet him somewhere. This was in 1990, in the fall of 1990. And you know, you always wanted to make things very, very brief when you met Whitey Bulger. You didn't want to have a lot of conversation with him. And so George Cater came in and he dropped the money to Whitey, or picked up the money. And Whitey said, okay, that's it, go ahead. And then George is walking out and said, geez, I got out again, I'm alive. And then Whitey says, hey, Cater, come back here. Okay, what's this? Cater comes back, and Whitey says, I forgot to tell you one thing, George. Vote no on Question 3. It goes too far. But, you know, Barbara was great, and I loved her, and you know, we all owe her a lot of money, and you know, right now everybody should just think about your wallet. Think about all the extra money that's in your wallet, and has been in your wallet. You know, and you don't even, I always tell people, you don't even have to own property, you know? She saved you, if you just own a crappy car, she saved you thousands upon thousands of dollars over this last 35 years. I used to get, you know, I didn't always have hair this color, but you know, a lot of it was from getting the excise tax bills in the 70s. You know, I owned this little wheat box in Somerville, and I got charged $66,000 per thousand. And that guy Gene Brew, he was the mayor. He was taking the money and hiring his buddies. You know, now he's telling Chris Leiden about what a wonderful guy he is. But I just want to leave you with one last thing. You know, I'm not a guy who spent a lot of time throughout my life or career talking about deep philosophical issues and you know, theology and that kind of thing. And you know, we always wonder about you know, what's ahead. And when Barbara passed on, I remembered a column that she wrote a long time ago, and I asked Chip Ford about it if he could get me the column. And he didn't remember it either, but a couple of weeks later he found the column. It was from 2001, Christmas Eve 2001, her column for the Salem Evening News. And you know, wherever she is, and you know, whatever the future holds, I just wanted to share this with you because it's a side of her that most of us didn't see all that often. And she was talking about how when her father died, she went back to Pennsylvania for the services, and she and her son were in the graveyard, and they were just noticing what a nice view they had in the cemetery. And I just wanted to share this to you, you know, that just about maybe like something you might think of as some of her final thoughts. This is from her column in 2001, Christmas Eve. I wasn't praying, warning, or wishing, just discussing the view. Suddenly, over my son's shoulder, I saw my father passing by, as if on a caboose platform of a train, going backwards. He waved the little funny backward foreign way he did when I don't have much light here. And he said to me, "Bye, Vaughn," his nickname for me. He looked excited about the trip he was about to embark on. If he had planned to make a ghostly appearance, it would have been to my son, who was his favorite. It was just that, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. It was just that my sometimes psychic self was tuned in at the right place at the right time and looking in the right direction as he went by. In my family's church, it's taught that every soul stays around for 3 days after death before going on to the next life. I didn't believe that and wasn't looking for a sign. But there it was, and now, doubting Thomas that I am, having seen it with my own eyes, I'm a believer. Whether you're a believer or not, if there are missing guests in your cabin this season, it might be nice to imagine them all at another table somewhere with all other departed souls you have loved. So thank you again one last time, Barbara Anderson, for all you've done for us, and rest in peace. That's all remember.
I don't know what's in the next room, a rumba session or something? Zumba, yeah. Next speaker is someone you've probably read about, but haven't seen. And he does the Beacon Hill roll call vote. So if you, in your local newspaper is lucky enough to have it, you'll see the roll calls, how your local legislator voted, and the pro and con. That's all done by a man named Bob Katzen, who will come up and give a little spiel on remembering Barbara.
I'm sorry, Bob couldn't be here today, so I'm replacing him. No, I'm actually Bob Cassidy. But I want to thank Chip Ford and Chip Faulkner for putting all this together. And now let's have a moment of silence for Jim Broby's hair and his glasses. A couple of other people who are here besides the governor who left. Bob Hedlund, the Libertarian mayor of Weymouth, is here in the back, right near the bar, of course. And Bruce Charr, the minority leader, is here. He leads, what, 3 senators now, 4 senators, something like that. Bruce, he's at the bar as well. Notice the elected officials are at the bar for some reason. I spent a lot of time on Beacon Hill where, as you know, these days they vote, they don't, I'm sorry, let me try this again. These days they don't know whether to vote yay, nay, or not guilty.
True.
Right, so I met Barbara in the 1980s. And we quickly went from acquaintances and colleagues to friends. She and I was the replacement for Howie Carr on the Government Show. When Howie left to go to WHDH, I believe it was, I replaced Howie. Well, not that anybody can replace Howie, right? Sorry, Howie. So I was with Barbara and Jerry Williams for many, many years on WRKO. And Barbara and I would drive in from New York to the radio station every Tuesday. During the last decade or so, I spent every Christmas Eve with Barbara and Chip Ford. It's tough to limit the number of stories about Barbara, but I managed to limit it down to 3. First one is Barbara and I were on the air with Jerry Williams. It was 4 to 6 every Tuesday afternoon. And we were arguing about something. It was about 1 minute ago in the show. I don't remember what we were arguing about, but it was very important at the time. And as a joke, and most of you will understand the reference point here, I said, "Barbara, you ignorant slut," which is Jane Curtin and Jane Aykroyd, right? Everybody knows that? Anybody doesn't know that reference? Right, okay. Well, we quickly found out that anybody under 35 years old did not have that reference point. We just thought I was saying, Barbara, you ignorant slut. So it was horrible. This was before email, but the station got faxes and phone calls. And years later, I literally would go to a function or something like this, and I'd be introduced, hi, this is Bob Katz. Aren't you the guy who called Barbara Anderson a slut on the radio? Because it just, you know, they never heard the apology the following week. Barbara had a great sense of humor, which wasn't always evident, but I would spend Christmas Eve, as I said, with Chip and Barbara. And I would tend to be the guest that leaves late, one who never leaves, has to be asked to leave. Barbara was too polite for what she said. She looked at me about 2 a.m. and said, Bob, do you have to use the bathroom before you leave? And I'm like, yes, I did. Wait a minute. She said, oh no, I didn't mean it that way, but she did. The third one is a short story, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but Barbara's mother was sick, as you know, and I was talking to her about spending money down. You know how you plan for Medicaid and so forth by spending your money so you don't have to use your private funds and so forth. And I said, I know a good lawyer who can help you do that. And Barbara said, no, I have the money, I'm going to spend it first. I don't want the state to pay for me. I mean, that was Barbara, right? That was her. She practiced what she preached, practiced what she preached. All right, now, here, you're wondering why the index cards are passed out there, perhaps. There's index cards and little golf pencils as well. So, the question is, can you describe your life and essentially write your epitaph in 6 words? That's what the editors of Storytelling magazine asked their readers in 2006. Thousands of readers responded, from everyday people to the rich and famous to the well-known authors. The result, a book entitled Not Quite What I Was Planning, 6-word memoirs by famous and obscure people. Available at Amazon.com, 45 new copies from $5.99, 65 used copies from 15 cents. The entries are fascinating to read. Some of my favorites, you have to limit to 6 words. No wife, no kids, no problems. Most successful accomplishments based on spite. My first concert, Zappa, explains everything. Alone at home, cat on lap. Follow the rules, not dreams, never again. Danced in fields of infinite possibilities. Boy, if I had a hammer. Best days even on the worst day. And what is the hokey pokey is what it's all about. I made that one up. That's more than 6 words. So as I sat down to write 6 words for Barbara, I thought, what would be her 6-word epitaph that would really fit her? A few things that would attempt to encapsulate the totality of a person, just 6 words. Because Barbara was so many things to so many people, how can one possibly capture the essence in 6 words? She touched so many lives, people of various and wide backgrounds. For instance, there are white people of all ages here.
Okay.
It's a tough audience. What can we say to remember Barbara by? Here's what I propose. Tough as nails, a real mensch. 6 words. Tough as nails, a real mensch. For those of you who are not Jewish and don't speak Yiddish, a mensch is the following. A person of integrity and honor, someone to admire and emulate, someone of noble character. The key to being a real mensch is nothing less than character, dignity, and a sense of what is right, responsible. A mensch is a particularly good person, like a stand-up guy or gal, person with the qualities one would hope for in a dear friend or trusted colleague. And to me, that was Barbara. So now it's your turn. We passed out the index cards and the pencils as well. And while the next film is on, we're going to ask you to write Barbara's 6-word epitaph. You only get 6 words. Think about it carefully, and we'll read some of them later, and we'll eventually give them to Chip, Ford, and to Lance and the family as well. In the meantime, Barbara, we miss you a lot. And you can share this line with Muhammad Ali today. Barbara, you were the greatest. Thank you.
Barbara Anderson grew up in St. Mary's, Pennsylvania, a small coal town between Erie and Pittsburgh. Did you feel part of your town, or did you feel some distance, some alienation? Were you dying to get away?
I've never felt part of anything, Chris. No, I definitely didn't feel comfortable. Because I was always asking questions, you know, about the religion, which was 80% Catholic at the time in the town. And I wanted to see things and go places. And I used to tell everybody when I grew up, I'm going to travel and see the world. And they said, no, you'll talk about it, but when you grow up, you'll be like everybody else. I was in Catholic school, and we used to have these little, and she called it the post office, and each of us had an envelope, and the nun would put messages to us, private messages, about ourselves, trying to develop us, I suppose, or criticism. Instead of bringing it out in class, she would tell us privately what our flaws were. And I was always hearing through grade school, because all the nuns had their little post offices, that I was a natural leader, and that I should always be very careful to lead for good and not for evil. And this was a tremendous burden on an 8-year-old kid. I mean, when you're growing up with hell, you know, and people who could be damned forever. And I was going to lead, and possibly if I led the wrong way, not really knowing what I was doing at age 8, that people could be burning forever throughout eternity because of me. I just didn't want the responsibility. I didn't want to be a leader. And I've always resisted it. If you're looking for root causes of things, I just don't want to go into the office and have a little note taped to my wall saying, I'm a leader, Barbara, go out there and don't make any mistakes because the whole world is depending upon you. I would rather everyone participates in the decision making so that it isn't all my mistake if something goes wrong.
I'm going to do it. I just need him to know. I'm not going to be there for cocktails at 6:15.
All right.
I will be there, I hope, for dinner at 7 because I haven't eaten all day.
I don't know anyone who's had a Catholic education that didn't carry it all through their lives. And looking back on it, it was very valuable. I wouldn't have missed it. I wouldn't have subjected my own child to it. But it was really good because it built up this sense in me that grown-ups don't know what they're talking about, that they will tell you all kinds of bizarre stories in order to manipulate your behavior.
Authority, as she observed it, was a license to scare people. At the same time nuns were talking hellfire, politicians in the 1950s were selling fallout shelters, anticipating nuclear war.
So between the nuns manipulating us and the politicians manipulating us using the nuclear war threat, I believed by the time I was 11 or 12 that I would never see 18. I mean, I was going to die, and then I was going to hell, of course. And then this didn't happen. I mean, the nuclear war never came. I'm 43 years old. It hasn't happened yet. And I no longer believe anything any adult, which is defined as anyone older than I am, tells me, ever. Because they all lied, they all exaggerated, they distorted. They did it to make us sit still in school and not chew gum.
Twice married, twice amicably divorced, she has one son now at the University of Massachusetts.
I was a terrible early mother because it was just unbearable for me. There's this sense of responsibility. And we lived in California when Lance was 3, and we lived in an apartment with a swimming pool. So he'll never let me forget this. This little kid riding around on his tricycle with a political bumper sticker on, if I remember. Somebody was running for the Senate out there. And then he was wearing a Sears life jacket. You could get these little rubber life jackets that zipped up the back. It was like a vest. And he would wear that just in case he rode his tricycle into the swimming pool. And then he had this little helmet in case we had an earthquake and a building fell on him.
That doesn't sound like a rebellion against responsibility. You certainly weren't shedding it.
Oh, well, exactly. And that's why I don't want people to give me responsibility. I take it very seriously. And it just destroys my whole life, being responsible, because I do it. So that's why I don't want it. And people who can just shrug it off don't mind having it, I suppose.
We'll be in touch with you as we go along. If anything should happen so that you can stop, we'll let you know. Because we certainly have to let you out there when there's no need to do it.
There is consistency here. She's uncomfortable with dependency, with taking orders or giving them.
I have never liked the idea of anybody being able to tell me what to do. And that's probably what the whole tax revolt's about, as far as I'm concerned, which is this early childhood defiance, which a lot of us feel, which is, don't tell me what to do. Who do you think you are?
Barbara Anderson was a conquered intellectual, a Thoreau and an Emerson buff, long before she got to New England, especially Thoreau, the poet of Walden solitude, who aspired to be a good neighbor and a bad subject. Thoreau was a tax protester himself, though his was a statement against slavery and the U.S. invasion of Mexico in the 1840s. For Barbara Anderson, tax protest is its own reward. And for our society of hardy consumers in the 1980s, she recalls just one anti-political side of Thoreau, the man who saw little virtue in the actions of the masses of men, the Thoreau who wrote that one man more right than his neighbor constitutes a majority of one.
I just keep in touch with what's truly essential, simplify things as much as I can. I've never found anybody that I think was more right than Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau wasn't trying to be a leader either, and he wasn't into leaders. He just followed his own drummer and really approved of people who do. He would tell everyone to follow his own drummer wherever it was going.
But would Thoreau have voted for Prop 2.5?
Oh, absolutely. Sure he would have. I mean, what would he have voted for? Bigger government? More money being taken from taxpayers? Property taxes going up? Could he have paid 4.5% of the value of his little cottage there at the edge of Walden Pond? Of course he couldn't have. And he wouldn't have thought he should. And he wouldn't have approved of some of the things taxes are going for, and he wouldn't have approved of the government intrusion. If I weren't sure he had been, I wouldn't have done it, Chris. I mean, obviously, I think a lot about what he would think of Massachusetts if he were here now. People are going to try to do things for themselves a little bit more and aim toward a little bit more self-reliance and freedom, I think, back the way it was in the beginning of the country.
In the end, Beacon Hill is the stage where Barbara Anderson plays out her homegrown defiance. She's bearing down in this case on the State House, where the legislature's tax authorities are tailoring a looser tax cap as a way around her own Question 3.
First floor. They're doing a documentary on my life.
Oh, wonderful.
It's your surface, certainly willing to stand here and talk to you. Now, she said $3,800 last year as a part of her last tax package, and we want that $3,800. And I want to know why we can't have it, and why she's increasing a tax when they've got a surplus. I simply can't imagine, particularly a tax that isn't going to do the business climate here any good at all. Just as they're starting to have problems in the high-tech industry, and she's going to increase a tax on them. I mean, is this sensible tax policy? And besides, why isn't the tax...
I heard about her first when she had taken over the Citizens for Limited Taxation. And all the boys in the State House were very patronizing. Talked about this nutcake of a woman that used to be the secretary. She's very, very effective about mounting campaigns in the public arena, in the press, that force those men up in the State House to pay attention to her and to pay attention to the people for whom she speaks. None of the men up there quite know how to handle her, and they just mutter and moan. They haven't figured out how to deal with her at all.
Hi, Howard. I'm up at the State House. McGovern thing is over, and I've seen the package. It's what I said it was. She's not calling it a tax increase. She's calling it a reduction in the rate. But Volk is having a press availability at 3:30. It would be helpful if you can grab a cab and come up here. I am wiped out from this debate.
It is a scream to see them up in the State House. She walks up, she heads for the press, and they scramble to get behind her.
You got a reaction?
Well, we're passionately opposed to the Senate version. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
That's the Captain Gates.
Yeah. And we have, well, the motive behind it is very suspicious at this point, coming from the Senate. I mean, Senator McGovern has said many times she does not like a surtax repeal. And to actually want to make it retroactive seems to indicate that what she doesn't like is Question 3 on the ballot.
Those bozos in the high-tech council are about 80 yards behind her. They can't even keep up with her.
Barbara Anderson's political partner is Howard Foley, head of the Massachusetts High-Tech Council. They pooled intelligence and they mapped strategies in her battle station across the common from the State House.
And all the people who were out there saying that 2.5 would be the end of the world are out there saying Question 3 will be the end of the world. And the League of Women Voters was there, obviously not knowing what it was talking about. So Bob Schaefer had to quickly step in every time that the League was asked a question because...
This alliance with high-tech has seemed odd for a populist and latter-day transcendentalist, as if Thoreau had married Main Street to sell Prop 2.5.
CLT wasn't a populist organization of citizens. It was a business-inspired group which had a goal, which was a legitimate goal. Improve the business climate by reducing the tax burden on business.
The biggest benefits of all were reaped by the utility companies, whose property had tremendous reductions in their assessments. Most small taxpayers ended up with very little difference.
The fact that we as a business organization have allied with her on a number of these issues is strictly a function of our congruence on the issues.
She is performing a valuable service that ultimately benefits industry.
And that's one of the things that people raise as an intellectual concern with Barbara, that she's not able to respond. Why, at every occasion, does what she's pushing for seem to result in the greatest gains going to those who already have the most?
I am very proud to be aligned with the people who are the industrialists, the entrepreneurs, the ones who keep the economy moving. I mean, no high technology community, no big business, no jobs, no services, no money, no anything.
With her foot soldiers and high-tech treasury, Barbara Anderson and her private army hold strategic ground against the elected establishment.
Barbara Anderson will not be working alone. 5 years ago, the Citizens for Limited Taxation led a modern tax revolt in this Commonwealth. Their courage and dedication prove that you can beat City Hall and even the state legislature.
Speaker, why don't we just eliminate all the taxes and go home? And then we'll let CLT run the state, and, you know, which may be an interesting situation.
By putting the question on the ballot, proponents always define the terms of debate, and the opponents are forced to play damage control and defensive politics.
Shadow government in this case means legislation by referendum. Some see Barbara Anderson as a sort of shadow governor.
Because the one thing about a shadow government is not responsible to anyone.
She has certainly set constraints, broad limits, as to the field in which anybody in policy-making positions can operate because of the threat of the ballot question.
There could be some problems in taking a lot of issues, too many issues to the ballot, which may let the legislature off from dealing with difficult issues and start to defer and delegate to referendum government.
If we didn't have an initiative petition process in Massachusetts, then we would not have stopped the spiral upward of property taxes, and we would not have brought the tax burden down to the national average. We couldn't have done anything. We would still be helpless and out of control. If you don't have the ability to go directly to the people and let the people make their own laws and put a stop to some of these things, then there's nothing you can do.
She's not speaking as an individual. She is expressing what a lot of people feel.
She can do it well because she's singing a song that everybody would like to hear, and that's saving tax dollars.
Barbara Anderson, Citizens for Limited Taxation.
She is a political personality, as important as the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and the Governor of the Commonwealth.
13 months ago, I think it was just 13 months ago, the Governor of the Commonwealth said that if the legislature, in its lack of wisdom, repealed the surtax, he would veto that repeal. And we think it is wonderful. It's even heartwarming, Mr. Chairman, to see the Governor of the Commonwealth now come out and demand that the legislature reverse its 2-year phase-out and insist on itself on immediate repeal. And speaking of respect, Mr. Senate Chairman, as you mentioned earlier, you have to respect somebody who will come out publicly the way the Governor has and admit that he was so wrong.
Governor Dukakis, for all the times he's been bruised in combat with Barbara Anderson, refuses to recognize his shadow.
I don't sense that the CLT presence is a particularly dominating one, though they're active and they work hard at what they do.
She had the chance to run this year. Clearly she could have run for governor on the Republican ticket. When you run for office, it's more risky than what Barbara's doing.
Even if it might be a psychological problem with me, I think I'm right. And that we have to move away from our dependence upon leaders and heroes and people who supposedly are experts, know more than we do about how our lives should be run.
I'm not sure she wants the baggage that goes along with holding office. Then you have to make decisions and start to be a little less direct and come up with a little less simple answers.
I think I'm on the right track. I don't think there should be leaders. I think we should all be our own leaders. So how'd you vote on 1 and 2?
I voted no on 1 through 3.
That was an easy decision for you. Did you have to write down little pieces of paper like everybody else?
It's always a pleasure being around you, Barbara. You always attract a crowd.
Would you like the flyer on question 3? If we lose, tomorrow night I'm going to the Celtics game. We've got about 6 hours before I have to worry about that.
Hi. How you doing? Okay. Come to a party?
I don't have much time for sports, and I don't have time for travel, so I do politics. And the next thing I do I've given some thought to serious bird watching and astronomy, and I would like to learn to do that cruel work.
The mood swing here varies, yes. I've decided I either want to win this, or I want to win it, or I want to lose it big. I don't want any little piddling defeat here.
I've had a feeling that I'm getting a little restless. But this is fun. You know, I won't ever walk away from anything. I never have. It's a matter of if a door opens, you walk through it. You don't go around opening doors.
How am I allowed to feel now? You really think we won?
On question 3.
Yeah. Did we win?
Yes.
Okay, I want to thank Ed Corris, who's walking down the aisle here. He reviewed a gazillion tapes for us and did all the setup. Ed Corris. Thanks, Ed. Now, last one up, Chip Ford.
Well, it's great seeing you all, and thanks for coming. I think that this would have heartened Barbara, even though she wanted no ceremony. I think this was a pretty good remembrance anyway. And as I promised her, the fight goes on. We're going to keep up doing what she started out 30 years ago, and Beacon Hill, keep your eyes open. Thank you, Doc.
Howie Cow wants me to correct it. I happen to say Edward J. King founded CLT. Edward J. King was a Democratic governor we had for a term in the early 90s. Edward F. King was the man who founded CLT in the 70s. And so again, I want to just follow up on Chip. I want to thank you all for coming. I think we really got some great memories of Barbara, and the battle continues. I know Barbara would wish she could be here for the battle in 2018. Folks, when the graduated income tax will be on the ballot for the 6th time. And believe me, CLT will be around to fight it. Thank you.